billionaire's wife humiliated a black CEO moments later. Her empire lost everything. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. The ballroom gleamed like old money chandeliers dripping light over crystal glasses, laughter polished sharp enough to cut. And then it happened. A gasp, a splash, a silence. White wine spilled down Malcolm Reed's navy suit like liquid contempt. The woman holding the glass didn't flinch. Her smile was perfect. Practice the kind that comes from knowing everyone else in the room will laugh with you. What a pathetic fool, she said, voice bright, brittle, and cruel. The laughter followed, rolling through the tables like applause for humiliation. Phones rose. Someone whispered, "Record this." Another said, "He shouldn't even be here." Malcolm didn't move. Not at first. He simply stared at the stain spreading across his jacket, at the way it shimmered under the chandelier, not a mark of shame, but proof. Proof that nothing, not money, not mastery, not success, could make them see past skin. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Malcolm. He reached for a napkin, dabbed the edge of his cuff, steady hands, steady breath. The woman still laughed, leaning closer to her friends. "That's what happens when they sneak into the guest list," she whispered, not quietly enough. Her husband, silver hair and a half smile, watched but didn't stop her. Why would he? This was their party, their circle, their empire. Across the room, a young waiter froze mid-step, eyes wide. He knew that man had seen his face once, on the cover of Business Review Global, but he didn't speak. Not yet. Malcolm's phone buzzed once in his pocket. He pulled it out, answered quietly. "Evelyn," he said, voice calm, almost gentle. "Yes, I'm still here." Ugh. He glanced toward the chandelier, toward the crowd, pretending not to stare. "No, don't send anyone. I'll handle it myself." The woman raised her glass again, smirking. "Maybe next time buy a real suit." Malcolm looked at her not with anger, but with memory. He'd seen this before. 20 years ago, a security guard telling him he didn't look like someone who could afford a meeting room. 10 years ago, a client asking if he was the driver. Always the same tone, always the same laugh. He turned slightly, light catching the curve of his jaw, the damp fabric, the quiet fury behind his eyes. "You'll regret that," he said softly, more to himself than to her. She laughed again, tipping her glass. "Is that a threat?" "No," Malcolm replied, "just a forecast." The orchestra in the corner shifted to a slower tune. The sound of violins bled into the tension like smoke. In the next few minutes, a phone call would echo through this hall, the kind that could erase fortunes. But right now, the room was still caught between laughter and silence, not realizing which one would end first. And when it did, it wouldn't be him who was drowning, it would be them. 10 minutes earlier, Malcolm Reed had walked through those same ballroom doors like any other guest. No entourage, no badge. Just a slim black envelope tucked into his inner pocket embossed with the silver crest of the Horizon Group, the very company celebrating a billion-dollar expansion that his fund quietly financed. He'd chosen to come alone. No PR shield, no assistant whispering names. Just him, a glass of water, and a plan to observe the people who would soon call him partner. They hadn't recognized him, not the hostess, not the photographers snapping every designer gown that passed. The man in the tailored navy suit, simple watch, and unbranded shoes didn't fit their picture of power. From the corner of the room, he'd watched the speeches start, the billionaire host raising a toast to legacy and excellence, the wife beside him glittering in sequins and confidence. Malcolm had smiled slightly, almost ruefully. Legacy, he thought. Funny word for people who never built anything themselves. When the host stepped away to greet investors, she stayed behind restless, bored, scanning the crowd for someone to laugh at. That was before the spill, before she made history in the worst way possible. Now, as the band played a smooth jazz cover no one was listening to, Malcolm stood near a marble column, replaying her words in his head. Not with anger, with study. Every syllable told him exactly how this company treated people beneath their money line. The young waiter from earlier approached, voice tentative. "Sir, are you all right? I can bring you another jacket from the back." Malcolm turned, the corners of his mouth lifting just enough to ease the boy's worry. "I'm fine," he said. "But thank you for asking. What's your name?" "Luis." "Luis," Malcolm repeated, memorizing it. "You saw what happened?" Luis nodded, eyes wide. "Yes, sir. Everyone did. It was wrong." "Then remember it," Malcolm said quietly. "Because tonight people will pretend they didn't." He slipped a small card from his pocket, black matte, no logo, only a number. "If someone pressures you to say otherwise, call this." Luis stared at it like it burned. "Who are you?" Malcolm's gaze softened. "Someone who believes in accountability." He walked toward the balcony doors, the cool air outside washing over him like reset glass. Across the ballroom, the woman who'd mocked him was already laughing again, unaware her empire was now on a 5-minute countdown. Inside his phone screen, a single message blinked from Evelyn, his COO. "Evelyn, ready on confirmation. Once you nod, we pull the deal." Malcolm typed one word back. Wait. He wanted them to see it first, the realization, the silence, the shift, the moment wealth met consequence. As he pocketed the phone, his reflection in the glass looked almost calm, but his eyes told a different story. This wasn't revenge. This was alignment. Some lessons aren't spoken. They're demonstrated in front of chandeliers and cameras, so no one can ever claim they didn't know better. The laughter didn't stop, it only changed key. Louder now, sharper, feeding on itself like gossip given breath. The woman in sequins refilled her glass, pretending not to look at Malcolm, pretending her cruelty was invisible. A photographer near the stage whispered to another, "What's his deal?" "No idea," the second said, raising his lens. "But that stains trending material." Clicks followed, quick and careless. Flash bulbs painted Malcolm in silver, bursts the silent stranger with wine on his chest and calm in his eyes. At the head table, Harold Langford, the billionaire host, returned from a call. "What's all this noise?" he asked, brow tightening as he spotted his wife mid-gesture pointing toward Malcolm. "Oh, just entertainment," she replied lightly. He thought he belonged here. Harold's chuckle was polite but uneasy. He glanced toward security, who was already moving in his direction. Malcolm remained still. The waiter, Luis, shifted by the service bar, holding a tray he'd forgotten to serve. His fingers hovered above his phone recording. No, not yet. He waited for the line that would matter. "Sir," the security guard began, his voice professional but cold. "I'm going to have to ask you to step outside." Malcolm turned, meeting his eyes. "On what grounds?" "Private event," the guard replied. "Guests only." Malcolm nodded once. "Then check your guest list." The guard hesitated, glancing toward the host. Harold gave a quick nod, an unspoken order. The guard reached forward. Luis flinched. So did half the staff watching from the edges. Before the man could touch him, Malcolm's phone buzzed again. A message appeared. "Ready to terminate. Waiting for your signal." He didn't reply. "Not yet. You're causing a scene," the wife said, her tone dripping mock concern. "No," Malcolm answered, voice low but clear enough to cut through the chatter. "You are." She blinked, then laughed again, high-pitched and empty. "Is that supposed to scare me?" "It's supposed to prepare you." Someone in the corner muttered, "Man, this is getting wild," while another whispered, "Why is he so calm?" The band faltered mid-note. Even the saxophonist sensed the room shift. Luis took a breath. "He's on the list," he said suddenly, his voice cracked but carried. "Name's Malcolm Reed. I saw it when we printed the table cards." Every head turned. Harold froze. The wife's smile cracked like glass. "Who told you to speak?" she snapped. "No one," Luis said, chest rising. "Just felt like truth deserved a voice tonight." Malcolm looked at him, just a nod, but it was enough. The boy's courage steadied the air. "Harold," Malcolm said evenly, "you might want to check your inbox. I sent you something." Harold frowned, pulling out his phone. The color drained from his face. The subject line glared back at him in bold letters. "Termination of acquisition agreement effective immediately." The wife's hand slipped from her glass. Wine splashed onto marble again. This time no one laughed. Malcolm turned away, leaving only the faint hum of the orchestra and the echo of what comes after arrogance. realization. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was surgical. Every whisper in the ballroom sounded like a confession being cut open. The band stopped entirely now, the saxophonist lowering his instrument like he'd wandered into the wrong history book. Harold Langford's phone still glowed in his shaking hand. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice cracking louder than the orchestra ever had. Malcolm didn't turn. "The deal's off," he said, calm and exact. "Effective tonight." "What deal?" someone in the crowd asked, half whisper, half panic. Luis stepped closer, tray still trembling in his hand. "The $1 billion one," he said before he could stop himself. "The whole thing, he funded it." Gasps rippled like dominoes falling through velvet. Every face changed shape in real time, confusion, denial, horror. The woman in sequins blinked hard, her lips parting like she could laugh it away. "No," she said, shaking her head. "You're bluffing." Malcolm finally turned to her. "Then check your email, too." She fumbled for her phone. The glow of the screen lit her face in pale blue disbelief. Contract withdrawn. Access revoked. Immediate review of assets under Langford Holdings. Her hand trembled. "Harold." The billionaire host was no longer a host, he was a man watching his empire vanish one pixel at a time. "This can't be legal," he muttered. "It's business," Malcolm replied. "You taught me that phrase yourself, remember?" From across the room, someone started filming. A guest in a gold dress, nervous but determined, whispered, "People need to see this." She wasn't wrong, the truth had never traveled faster than a phone in a scandal. Security hesitated, unsure who to protect anymore. The guard from earlier lowered his hand radio. "Sir, should I—" "Do nothing," Harold barked. "Already done," Malcolm said, cutting him off. He walked toward the center of the room, the same marble square where the wine had fallen minutes ago. The spot still glistened under chandelier light, a quiet witness to arrogance. "Funny thing about legacy," Malcolm said, voice rising just enough for the microphones to catch. "It's not built by who laughs the loudest. It's built by who stays standing when the noise stops." Luis stared at him, awe and fear mixing in his chest. The guests behind him were no longer whispering, they were recording, texting, calling, narrating the end of an empire in real time. The woman's eyes darted around the room, searching for allies. None came. Even the PR director had stepped back, already emailing statements. "You can't humiliate us like this," she snapped, desperation leaking through every word. Malcolm tilted his head. "Can't I?" He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The silence answered for him. From somewhere near the entrance, the hotel manager appeared, eyes wide. "Mr. Reed." "Not Mr.," Malcolm corrected gently. "Owner." The last word hit harder than the wine ever could. It hung in the air like a verdict, quiet, irreversible, and perfectly deserved. And just like that, the balance of the room shifted forever. Luis had never held a phone so tightly in his life. His palms were slick, but his grip wouldn't loosen. The little red light in the corner of the screen blinked steady, recording everything. He hadn't meant to film at first, but something in the air told him this moment mattered. It wasn't just rich people arguing over contracts. It was justice, standing where humiliation had just been poured. Across the ballroom, Malcolm stood motionless, centered under a chandelier that now seemed to spotlight him. His calm had gravity. It pulled every eye, every lens. The woman in sequins finally broke. "You can't just destroy people because you're offended." Malcolm turned to her slowly. "You destroyed yourself the moment you decided dignity was optional." The crowd stirred. Phones lifted higher. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, he is the investor." Another murmured, "This is going viral already." At the edge of the dance floor, the band members whispered among themselves. The drummer, still holding his sticks, muttered, "Man, I've never seen power shift that fast." Harold Langford was on his phone again, pacing, muttering fragments, lawyers, statements, damage control. Every word sounded smaller than the last. Luis zoomed in just as Malcolm reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple business card, black matte, unmarked except for his name, and one line, "Reed Capital Holdings." He placed it on the table between the wine glass and the broken pride. "You can call if you'd like to negotiate," he said, "but the price won't be the same tomorrow." The woman's jaw clenched. "You think this video will make you some hero?" Malcolm shook his head. "No, it'll make me a mirror." Louis' heart pounded. Those words, "make me a mirror," echoed through the microphone like thunder made of truth. Someone in the back shouted, "Say it again." Malcolm glanced up, a faint smile crossing his face. No need. You heard it the first time. A soft laugh spread, not mocking this time, but stunned, nervous, awakening. People were realizing what they'd just witnessed. Not a scandal, but a reckoning. Louise stopped recording and looked down at the video, replaying the last line. The comments were already flooding in live reactions. Disbelief, support. The clip was spreading before he even hit send. The hotel manager leaned close, whispering, "Mr. Reed, the media's calling." "Let them," Malcolm said. "They should have been here earlier." Then, quieter, he added, "Make sure every staff member who spoke up tonight gets paid for a month, whether they keep this job or not." Louise blinked. "You mean—" "I mean you," Malcolm said. The boy swallowed hard, the weight of it sinking in. For once, doing the right thing hadn't cost him everything it had given him a future. Behind them, the crowd shifted again. The laughter was gone. The murmurs had turned into applause, soft at first, then steady, like the sound of dignity returning to a room that had forgotten how to hold it. And in the reflection of the ballroom's mirrored wall, Malcolm didn't look like a man avenging an insult. He looked like something rarer, a man restoring balance. By the time the applause faded, the ballroom no longer felt like a celebration. It felt like a verdict. The chandeliers still glowed, but their light had changed. What once flattered power now exposed it. Harold Langford's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Every few seconds, another notification. Missed calls from board members, lawyers, the PR firm that had just posted, "We are reviewing recent developments at the Horizon Gala." And the woman in sequins, his wife, the architect of this disaster, sat frozen, her mascara smudged into the shape of disbelief. "Harold, say something," she whispered. "Fix it." "Fix it?" His voice cracked. "You poured wine on our future." Louis stood near the bar, still clutching his phone. The comments on his video were doubling by the minute. "This is how justice looks." He didn't even raise his voice. She messed with the wrong man. He didn't post it for fame. He just couldn't let silence win again. Security tried to clear the press that had already started gathering in the lobby, but it was too late. Word had leaked faster than champagne ever could. Black CEO cancels $1B deal mid-gala after racist humiliation. It was everywhere. Malcolm watched the chaos unfold like a storm he'd predicted but never celebrated. He wasn't smiling. He never smiled at collapse. "Evelyn," he said into his phone, voice steady. "Initiate the audit. Pull our shares from Langford Holdings. Alert the other investors quietly." Her response came crisp through the earpiece. "Already done. Their accounts are locked for review." Across the room, Harold's legal counsel appeared flustered, sweating. "Mr. Reed, surely we can talk—" "We could have," Malcolm interrupted, "before your company decided my worth was measured by appearance." The lawyer stammered. "It was a misunderstanding." "No," Malcolm said, turning away. "It was a mirror." A murmur of agreement swept the staff. The PR director, who'd stood silent earlier, stepped forward. "Mr. Reed," she said carefully, "the media will want a statement." He glanced around the room at Luis, at the trembling billionaire couple, at the guests pretending to text their way out of guilt. "They already have one," he said. "It's in every lens pointed this way." The ballroom's massive screen, meant for a slideshow of the company's milestones, flickered as an image replaced the schedule, the Langford logo fading out, replaced by black text on white. Reed Capital Holdings equity reclaimed. The crowd gasped. Someone clapped. One sound, sharp, alone. Then another, then more. It wasn't loud. It was honest. Malcolm looked up once more toward the chandelier that had witnessed everything. "You see, legacy doesn't disappear overnight," he said quietly. "It erases itself when it refuses to evolve." The cameras caught that line too. Behind him, the woman who had started it all whispered something no one could quite hear. Luis, still filming, caught the last word, "Sorry." But Malcolm didn't turn back. He walked toward the exit calm, deliberate, the kind of calm that comes only from knowing justice didn't need to be shouted. It just needed to arrive. Morning came like Judgment Day, quiet at first, then loud enough to drown a city. By sunrise, every business outlet from Forbes to Bloomberg had the same headline: $1B deal collapses after racist incident at Horizon Gala. The photo beneath it froze the world mid-shame. A woman in sequins, mouth open in disbelief, and Malcolm Reed, calm as marble, walking away. The internet didn't need context. The clip Luis uploaded had already done that. 10 million views overnight. Hashtags trending. Number respect is power, number the read moment. Inside a penthouse overlooking the skyline, Malcolm stood by the window, watching the first wave of morning light cut across glass towers. His phone buzzed relentlessly, reporters, senators, CEOs who suddenly remembered his number. He didn't answer any of them. Evelyn's voice came through his earpiece, measured but bright. We're up 40% in public sentiment. New partners want to meet this week. Horizon's shares dropped 20 in an hour. Malcolm exhaled slowly. Justice has its own market value, apparently. Want me to draft a statement? She asked. He shook his head. No press. Let the silence speak. It's louder. On the coffee table lay the invitation from last night, the silver-embossed envelope now stained faintly with wine. He looked at it for a long time before sliding it into a folder marked Evidence of Culture. Luis called next. Nervous. Grateful. Sir, I didn't mean for it to go that viral. I just thought people should see. They needed to, Malcolm said. And you made sure they did. I got fired this morning, Luis admitted quietly. Hotel said it wasn't professional. Malcolm didn't hesitate. You start here Monday. We'll call it professional enough. There was a pause, disbelief and gratitude blending in one breath. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me, Malcolm said. Just remember, truth has a cost. Never let it bankrupt your courage. He ended the call, and the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was earned. Across town, the Langfords were under siege. News vans camped outside their estate. The wife's PR apology trended lower than the footage of her laughter. Investors fled. Employees resigned. Legacy crumbled in real time. In the afternoon, a journalist cornered Malcolm's assistant outside the office, asking for a quote. Evelyn's response was simple. We don't build power to humiliate. We build it so we don't have to. That line led every evening broadcast. By nightfall, Malcolm was back at his desk, city lights flickering like slow applause beyond the glass. He replayed the video once, not for satisfaction, but for study. The sound of his own voice saying, "You destroyed yourself the moment you decided dignity was optional," still landed heavy. He closed the laptop, leaned back, and whispered to the empty room. They called it revenge. I call it restoration. And in that quiet space, justice finally felt complete. That night, Malcolm didn't go home. He stayed in the office long after the skyline dimmed, the city humming beneath him like a machine that never sleeps. The headlines had cooled into think pieces now. Race, power, and the price of respect. How one CEO changed corporate decorum overnight. Everyone wanted a quote, an angle, a slogan. He wanted none of it. He turned off the screen. The silence brought memory. Years peeled backward like old wallpaper. He was 22 again, standing in the marble lobby of a downtown firm that had promised him an internship, the kind that could launch a life. The receptionist, a woman in pearls, had looked at his resume, then at him. The mailroom's around the back, she'd said. He'd smiled anyway. He always smiled then, believing politeness could soften prejudice. Then came 32, the boardroom in Atlanta, when he'd pitched his first fund. A client had shaken his hand and asked, "You're the founder? Really?" That same tone, that same disbelief disguised as curiosity. He remembered how his hands had trembled under the table, not from anger but from restraint. If I lose control, he'd told himself, I confirm their story. If I stay silent, I rewrite it. And he had. For 20 years, he'd built an empire out of those swallowed moments, every insult turned into infrastructure. Now, sitting beneath the glow of the city he once dreamed of conquering, he realized he hadn't conquered anything. He'd simply corrected it. The door creaked. Evelyn stepped in quietly, 2 cups of coffee in hand. You haven't gone home, she said. Neither have you. She smiled. I didn't want you sitting here thinking alone. He accepted the cup, still hot. Do you think I went too far? Evelyn leaned against the glass wall. You didn't humiliate anyone. You just stopped letting them do it to you. Malcolm looked out at the skyline, its reflection stretching across the office floor. That's the thing about power, he said softly. You don't feel it when you gain it. You feel it when you finally don't need to use it. For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, the city pulsed indifferent, eternal. Inside, the room carried the kind of silence that follows justice. Not relief, but recognition. He thought of Luis, of the trembling voice that had chosen truth over comfort. He thought of the millions watching online, seeing themselves in that clip not because they were CEOs, but because they were human. Malcolm finished his coffee, set it down, and whispered to the glass. "For every time we were told to go around back, this is the front door opening." Evelyn nodded, eyes wet but proud. "And it's staying open." The night held its breath, and for the first time in years, Malcolm didn't feel like he was standing against the world. He felt like he was standing within it, finally seen, finally equal. By morning, the world had moved not forward, but awake. The clip of Malcolm standing in the ballroom had escaped the algorithm's gravity. It wasn't just trending, it was transforming. College classrooms played it during ethics lectures. Morning talk shows called it the modern corporate reckoning. Churches quoted him on Sundays. Even late-night comedians said, "He didn't shout, he just shut the system down." The ripple had become a current. In Los Angeles, a young lawyer posted, "For every time I was mistaken for the assistant, this one's for us." In Johannesburg, a cafe owner wrote, "Dignity travels faster than money." In Seoul, a group of students translated Malcolm's line, "Respect isn't a favor, it's a reflection," and painted it on the wall of their business school. Luis watched it all unfold from the back seat of a taxi, the city scrolling by like a new world. He was on his way to his first day at Reed Capital. His uniform from the hotel was folded in his lap, a reminder of what silence used to cost. Across town, the Langford's mansion gates stayed shut. Satellite vans lined the street like vultures dressed in logos. Their empire hadn't just fallen, it had been dissected. Boards withdrew, clients vanished, and a single 40-second video had done what no lawsuit could, reveal who they really were. Meanwhile, at Reed Capital's headquarters, Evelyn walked into the morning briefing room, tablet in hand. "We've had 8 acquisition offers, all from companies pledging diversity reforms," she said. Malcolm smiled faintly. "Funny how ethics get fashionable once there's a profit margin. But the good news," she continued, "is that people are listening." She tapped the screen, projecting dozens of social posts from around the world, testimonies, thank yous, people sharing their own moments of quiet resistance. Some had never spoken up before. Now they couldn't stop. Malcolm studied them in silence. Each post felt like a pulse. "It's strange," he said. "I didn't set out to start anything." Evelyn replied, "You didn't. You revealed what was already there." Reporters waited outside the building, hoping for a statement. Malcolm stepped out briefly, just enough for the cameras to catch his face. "What's next for you, Mr. Reed?" one called out. He paused, sunlight catching the edge of his cuff. "Next?" He glanced at the skyline behind them. "We rebuild the right way." A journalist shouted another question. "Do you forgive them?" Malcolm met her eyes. "Forgiveness isn't the issue. Accountability is." The crowd murmured, but he was already walking back inside, not escaping, just done. By evening, the clip of that exchange was looping again, millions of views, countless captions. One message: power with grace. Some revolutions are loud. This one was calm, deliberate, and broadcast in HD. And as the sun dipped behind the city that had once doubted him, Malcolm Reed became more than a man who ended a deal. He became a measure, a reminder that silence, when armed with truth, can move the world further than noise ever could. The week that followed felt less like aftermath and more like trial one, the world attended by live stream. Every network ran the footage on loop, the spill, the silence, the revelation. Commentators called it the wine incident, like it was a scandal, but those who watched the full video knew better. It wasn't wine that made history, it was what came after it stopped dripping. The Langfords faced what arrogance always does when the spotlight turns honest. Their billion-dollar brand hemorrhaged clients. The foundation they ran for equality initiatives quietly shut down. Even their friends began every sentence with, "It's such a shame," before deleting their photos together. Harold Langford released a statement 3 days later, voice trembling on camera. "We deeply regret," he began, but the world had already decided regret without restitution was just noise. His words trailed off. His apology drowned in disbelief. His wife never spoke publicly again. Reporters said she'd left the city, but the truth was simpler. She couldn't step into a room without hearing Malcolm's voice echo back, "You destroyed yourself the moment you decided dignity was optional." Luis saw the headline pop up on his phone during lunch at Reed Capital. He looked around the office, clean lines, quiet confidence, people who greeted him by name. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like correction. Meanwhile, Malcolm was in Washington, testifying before a committee on corporate ethics. The same politicians who once ignored his calls now hung on every word. Racism doesn't always announce itself, he told them. Sometimes it wears perfume and a smile. Sometimes it hands you a drink before spilling it on you. The room fell silent. No slogans, no applause, just the weight of truth hanging steady. Later that afternoon, a senator pulled him aside. "Mr. Reed," she said, "you've changed how people talk about accountability." Malcolm smiled slightly. Talking is the easy part. That evening, news broke that Horizon Group's stock had been delisted pending investigation. Analysts called it the Reed effect. For the first time in decades, wealth had a moral audit. Evelyn sent him the numbers, millions in new funding requests, dozens of partnerships built on ethics clauses modeled after his own. "They're learning," she said. "They're adapting," Malcolm corrected. "Learning comes next." He walked to the window of his hotel suite, the Capitol reflected in the glass. Somewhere in that reflection, he saw his younger self, the intern turned away, the founder doubted, the man humiliated in front of a crowd. All of them stood taller now. The phone rang again, another interview request, another headline waiting. He let it ring. Power didn't need validation anymore. It had memory. It had meaning. Outside, sirens and city sounds faded into a kind of quiet he hadn't felt in years, the kind that followed a reckoning not born of anger, but of alignment where truth finally caught up to those who ran from it. And when it didn't shout. It simply arrived, steady, irreversible, inevitable. A month later, the city felt different, not louder, just more awake. The news cycle had moved on to new scandals, new noise. But the story of Malcolm Reed still hovered like a quiet watermark under every headline about power and integrity. At Reed Capital's headquarters, the morning sunlight cut through glass walls, catching on the new plaque in the lobby. "Respect isn't a favor, it's a reflection." Luis walked past it every day, but that morning he stopped. He read it again, slower this time, and smiled. The words had once been a viral caption. Now they were a mission statement. Evelyn found him there. "He's waiting for you," she said. Malcolm's office looked out over the river, a stretch of silver water moving steady, patient. He stood beside the window, hands in his pockets. The same navy suit, but lighter somehow. "You've adjusted well," he said as Luis entered. "I still feel like I don't belong here sometimes," Luis admitted. "Everyone's so sharp." Malcolm turned. "You belong because you cared when others didn't. That's sharper than any degree." Luis nodded, swallowing emotion. "The video changed my life, sir. My family, too. My mom cried when she saw you defend me in that interview." Malcolm smiled faintly. "You defended yourself long before I did. You just didn't know it yet." Saturday. On the table lay a small folder labeled The Fellowship Initiative. Inside were forms, scholarships, mentorships, outreach programs. "We're starting this next quarter," Malcolm said. "For students like you, people who see wrong but still speak up." Luis blinked. "You're serious?" "Completely. Change doesn't survive unless you teach it to someone else." For a moment, neither spoke. The office hummed softly, printers, footsteps, life continuing. Malcolm poured 2 cups of coffee, handed one over. "To courage," he said. Luis raised his cup. "To justice." Malcolm nodded. "Justice is courage that refuses to wait." Outside, the clouds parted, sunlight sweeping through the floor to ceiling glass like forgiveness made visible. Evelyn entered quietly with a folder of updates, donations pouring in, new firms adopting their equity clauses, schools requesting Malcolm's keynote on ethical leadership. "You've started a movement," she said. He looked at her, then at Luis. "No," he corrected gently. "We just reminded people what decency looks like when it refuses to apologize." From the street below, reporters snapped photos as Malcolm and Luis stood by the window, mentor and witness, 2 generations of the same resistance, framed by the skyline that once ignored them. The world would keep talking, analyzing, reposting, monetizing. But inside that room, it was simple. A black CEO, once humiliated in front of chandeliers, now building a future where no one had to earn their dignity twice. Malcolm glanced at the plaque again on his way out. The reflection in its glass caught his face, calm, grounded, whole. "We can't change the past," he said softly, "but we can make sure it never feels at home again." And then he walked out, the door closing behind him with the quiet authority of a man who had nothing left to prove, only something left to build. The auditorium lights dimmed. 1,000 faces waited in quiet anticipation. On stage, a single spotlight cut through the darkness, landing on Malcolm Reed. No podium, no teleprompter, just a man and a story that had already traveled farther than he ever planned. Behind him, a massive screen displayed one image, not of the wine, not of the ballroom, but of a door opening to sunlight. Beneath it, one line glowed in white text: "Dignity doesn't expire." He looked at the crowd: students, entrepreneurs, workers, strangers. Some wore suits, others wore hope. "A month ago," he began, "I didn't plan to become anyone's headline. I was just tired of pretending silence was strategy." The audience leaned in. His voice was low, cinematic, but real, the tone of a man who had already paid for every word he spoke. "The truth is, I didn't win that night. None of us did. What happened wasn't victory, it was correction. The system didn't collapse because I was loud. It collapsed because it finally met the weight of its own arrogance." He paused, eyes tracing the front row: Luis, Evelyn, and a dozen new faces from the Fellowship Initiative. Their presence was proof that power, redirected, could heal. "People ask if I forgave them," he continued. "Forgiveness isn't the finish line. Accountability is the starting point." Applause rose but softened quickly. The crowd didn't want to interrupt. He walked slowly across the stage. "For years I was told I didn't belong in rooms like that. But what they never understood is that belonging was never theirs to grant. It's built by action, protected by integrity, and proven by time." On the screen, clips began to play, not of the humiliation, but of what followed. Luis starting his mentorship program, employees signing equity charters, strangers across continents painting his words on city walls. The ripple had become a record. Malcolm watched the footage with the audience. His voice steadied. "If you ever find yourself in a room where respect costs extra, walk out. Build your own. Then open the door wider than they ever did for you." The line landed like a quiet thunderclap. People stood not cheering, but rising. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, hearing the sound swell, then fade. "Before we continue," he said, echoing the very line that had once opened his story, "where are you watching from?" The crowd laughed softly, recognizing the callback. "And if you believe in dignity and justice," he added, smiling, "don't just hit like, live it." The lights brightened. The audience erupted, standing, clapping, some crying, some filming. But Malcolm didn't stay to bask in it. He stepped off the stage, blending into the crowd as if to say the legacy didn't belong to him, it belonged to everyone who saw themselves in that mirror. Outside, the evening air felt new again. The city glowed gold against the skyline, the same one that once overlooked him. Malcolm Reed looked up, exhaled, and whispered to no one in particular, "Justice doesn't need noise, it just needs memory." Then he walked toward the light, steady, certain, and free.